All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. And I want to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon. My name is Ross Levine, and I'm a physician scientist and the Chief Scientific Officer here at MSK. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to today's virtual presidential forum. Thank you for joining us and for your steadfast support of MSK and our mission. Today's event will give you an exclusive look at the groundbreaking research presented by MSK physician scientists and researchers at the recent American Society of Clinical Oncology annual meeting, the world's largest gathering of oncology professionals and a showcase for the latest innovations of cancer treatment. And this year, as in previous years, MSK had a central role in presenting groundbreaking research across several areas. Here with us today, we have three of our superstars. Dr. Eileen O'Reilly, co-director for medical initiatives at the David M. Rubenstein Center for Pancreatic Cancer Research and Winthrop Rockefeller Endowed Chair of Medical Oncology. Dr. Saad Usmani, chief of the Myeloma Service. Dr. Mark Dickson, an associate attending physician in the Sarcoma Medical Oncology Service. Your support and partnership has been essential to their work. Each of our speakers will present a short summary of their recent ASCO presentations, and then we'll have a brief discussion about what they've presented. But first, I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Selwyn Vickers, MSK's President and CEO and Douglas Warner Chair. Thank you again for joining us today and for your continued support. And now I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Vickers.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Ross. And I want to thank all you all for being here. Every person joining us today is a part of the MSK community. And that community really drives our scientific progress and the compassionate care we give to patients to change their lives. This community consists of numerous components. It begins with our trustees who really, as leaders, guide all that we do. It includes those personnel and staff who work throughout our centers and hospital. It includes our caregivers. It includes our researchers who toil endlessly to bring forth discoveries. And it includes our clinical faculty who you will hear from today, who are part of driving change, not only for the pride of MSK, but for really advancing the field of cancer care, but most of all, making a difference in patients' lives. Now, the straw that stirs the drink, I would argue, particularly in this space, is our extraordinary philanthropic community. You provide the foundation for us to pursue bold ideas, not go through that 18, 24-month cycle waiting for a grant. And yet these ideas are continually moving forward because of your support. Many of you are in this journey because of your own personal experience, your own journey in fighting cancer, but also maybe your loved ones. And others are simply wanting to make a difference in transforming the lives of others who suffer from cancer. Many of you have had your own fundraising events. Some of you are part of Cycle for Survival, Fred's team. But either way, you're part of the mission of MSK being the world's leading authority of cancer and MSK ending cancer for life for many of our patients who succumb to this illness. You heard Ross speak about ASCO. It is the largest cancer meeting in the world. Well, this year, well over 45,000 oncologists from 160 countries. This year, like almost every year, MSK had a phenomenal presence that distinctively allows it to stand out as the world's leading cancer center. There are 5 presentations that really cut across all cancer, and they're called plenary sessions. And that's where everybody gathers at the meeting, either virtually or in person, to hear these 5 sessions for the whole organizations. There are cancer centers that in their existence have never had a plenary session. There are those who hope to get one every 5 to 10 years. It's a routine part of MSK, and this year, 3 out of the 5 of those presentations had MSK leaders as senior authors. And that just speaks to the special nature of who we are and the talented leaders and clinicians that make up our world. This also is due to the mass support that you provided as philanthropic leaders and as contributors to MSK. Over the past year, we've continued to have a global impact. And in 2025, we had 10 FDA drugs approved. Now, mind you, a cancer center is excited if they get 1 or 2 drugs approved every 3 years. And we're talking about 10 in a year. We're making incredible progress around targeted therapy, really attacking genetic mutations, empowering the immune system to be even smarter and more durable, using vaccines in powerful and new ways, and advancing cellular therapy now to not only treat liquid tumors, but also to treat solid tumors. Undergirding all of this is our ability to manage data. And that data aspect will be a huge part of us moving forward. Empowering our use of data will be artificial intelligence that will allow us to often move faster than we've ever seen before, make discoveries that we thought we might not have possible, and impact care in ways like we had not dreamt of having. That process you will hear some about today, and clearly this is a part of the larger strategy for us seeking to end cancer for so many of the patients who are suffering from this disease. In many of the talks, you will see survival curves, and you'll see the improved survival from what is standard and what's being innovatively led by our leaders. But I want to clarify that gap is not just a white space. It's actually more life for our patients. It's more weddings, it's more soccer games, it's more family reunions, and it's more hope. Understand that that's what that means for those individuals who are living through that. At the end of the day, what we are able to do is driven by your generosity that helps us move these promising ideas from the laboratory to clinical trials and to clinical trials to patients. And we want to continue to do that. That philanthropic generosity also helps us keep the best talent, and it gives them the best opportunities to make an impact. So today you'll hear from 3 of our really outstanding faculty. I think Ross said it well, our superstars. I will make it clear that what they are presenting did not happen overnight. And it took years to pull this off, and it took consistent investment to make this happen. So this is a culmination of hard work. Some of it 15 to 20 years. Some of it's stuff we've dreamt about that's finally coming true. And so please look forward. We look forward to the presentations. We look forward to you continuing being a part of our community that clearly will transform the care opportunities for the patients we face each day. We'll start first with Dr. Eileen O'Reilly.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vickers and Dr. Levine. It's really an honor to be here this afternoon, and welcome again to everyone. So I've entitled this Pancreas Cancer Targeted Therapy and the Rapidly Changing Future, and just going to give a quick summary of the data and where this is headed in pancreas cancer. Next slide, please. So I realize the audience is likely very knowledgeable on this, but just to level set, RAS mutations are alterations in our DNA and our genetic makeup. Abnormal RAS mutations or mutated RAS occurs in cancer, occurs in about 25% of all cancers. And on the slide, you can see many of the cancers that are represented, the big 3 being lung, colorectal, and pancreas cancer being top of the list in that almost everybody with this malignancy will have a RAS mutation or abnormality or have adverse signaling. And why is that important? Because that drives metastasis, it drives growth, and it drives progression of cancer. And heretofore, RAS, while we've known about this for 50 years plus, and a tremendous amount of science has been undertaken over the last 5 decades, it's really only recently that major inroads have been made into targeting RAS successfully. And arguably, the highest bar of success is in one of the most challenging malignancies, pancreas cancer. And if you could please go to the next slide. So why the excitement here? So this is a story of a lovely lady that I looked after almost 4 years ago now. And when we saw this happening in the clinic, it was like a light bulb. Something real is happening. We're in for something good in this disease. And just a brief story here that she was in her 60s and has allowed us to share her story, had a large burden of disease, had been through a number of clinical trials and indeed had benefit from those. But then her cancer was sort of taking off in this progressive, rapid state of clinical decline, increase in pain, decrease in appetite, weight loss. And you can see that paralleled by a sharp upward rise on a tumor marker or biomarker, sort of representative of the disease burden. And was enrolled on a clinical trial of one of the first RAS inhibitors and had a very gratifying outcome in that within days, pain was feeling better and went on to live another period of time that for which she and her family were extraordinarily grateful. It wasn't a cure, but it sort of set the scene for what's to come. Next slide, please. And then fast forward to the American Society of Clinical Oncology 10 days back was presenting this study, which looked at an oral RAS inhibitor in individuals with progressive metastatic pancreas cancer and compared it to our best standard. This was a large phase 3 or practice defining, practice changing study. And the goals were to understand how well you could shrink the cancer, control disease, and extend life, and also to look at it from the quality of life perspective. Next slide, please. So these were the outcomes. And I think the field agrees these are pretty stunning in pancreas cancer in terms of the incremental benefit for the addition of a pan-RAS inhibitor relative to chemotherapy. There's a large difference here in outcome for this new class of drugs compared to our current best standards. And that was paralleled by shrinkage of the cancer, by improvement in quality of life. So people felt better for longer on this. And you can see a doubling of the survival. And survival in terms of medians capture part of the story. So meaning half of individuals can do better and significantly better. And sadly, of course, too, in the other direction as well. And we're very optimistic based on the strength of these data that the FDA will view these favorably and will lead to a new standard in pancreas cancer in the proximate future. Next slide, please. So what does this mean? This is pivotal in that targeted therapy is now going to be a mainstay for every single individual with pancreas cancer. Even though this was an all-comers trial, everybody essentially has a RAS mutation. This study met every single endpoint, and it's now led RAS to no longer have this designation of being undruggable. It's targetable, and it's targetable in a very meaningful way. But nonetheless, this is the start, not the end. And there's huge opportunity here to build on this, to understand what the best combinations might be in terms of addressing what we know is likely to happen for the majority of patients, and that's resistance emerging. So part of the strategy is prioritizing what those key combinations might be and to move RAS targeting essentially into every stage of the disease. So into the post-op setting, into the pre-op setting, and one might imagine that the magnitude of benefit can be even greater. And we're extraordinarily lucky at MSK to have an amazing group of colleagues from basic science to translational research to clinical research who help execute all of this and leverage all of this to help build on what we trust and hope is a key change point in pancreas cancer. So thank you very much. I'll turn it over to Dr. Usmani, who is going to speak next.
Thank you so much, Dr. O'Reilly and Dr. Vickers, and thank you for all of you for joining us on this forum. So I'm going to be providing you updates on multiple myeloma, and also, many of you may already be familiar, but wanted to introduce the disease. If we can go to the next slide. Myeloma is the second most common blood cancer, and we have approximately 36,000 new cases that get diagnosed. Typically, patients are in their late 60s, but at MSK, we treat many young patients. Common symptoms for this disease at diagnosis: Could be something as simple as bone pain, fatigue, but then patients can present with anemia, kidney problems, and frequent infections. I think the story of multiple myeloma over the past 2 decades has been very extraordinary. When I was starting in the field, the median survival for these patients was typically not more than 2 to 3 years. And now, many of our patients are living for 15, 20 plus years because of the advances we've made in diagnostics, prognostication, as well as new therapies. And in the last about 20 odd years, we've had 20 FDA approvals that have really transformed the field. And our team here at MSK has been at the forefront of many of these advances, and we continue to push the envelope for our patients. We go to the next slide. So, our main goal, with multiple myeloma today is to cure it. And our team is really focused on several aspects of this, and I'm going to highlight this in this slide. If we can keep on moving, the slide, please. Thank you. So the first point is, when do we intervene with patients? And this is where we want to identify patients before they're trying to developing symptoms and intervening so that we can nip this in the bud. And to do this, our team is focused on integrating genomic profiling, looking at the bone marrow microenvironment. So the bone marrow is the factory that makes all the blood cells, and that's where these cancer cells reside, and pairing that up with immune profiling to better define the risk of disease relapse. So identify people who are going to do well with certain therapies and identify people who may not do well and pick different treatments for them. Our team has also worked very hard in looking at ways to detect cancer at a very low level. So that is the MRD test. And we utilize this quite a bit in our clinical practice and research. And based on the disease biology, we're trying to maximize how we can get patients to the sustained MRD negativity, because that is what translates into survival benefit. And I'll demonstrate that with this study that we just presented at ASCO after more than 6 years of follow-up in newly diagnosed settings. So if we move to the next slide. So this is the Cepheus clinical trial, which is a study that looked at an antibody-based 4-drug combination for newly diagnosed patients compared to the previous standard of care 3-drug combination, and demonstrated that we can not just achieve very deep responses in patients. So you'll see this column in red, which was the positive result that favored this study. And we can sustain it over time. And so patients then can translate this deep response into survival benefit, which we see on the next slide. So very similar to the curves that Dr. O'Reilly showed, but what's gratifying about these curves, I couldn't have imagined as a trainee of being able to present these data. So we have patients who are now at a median of 76 months of follow-up, and the median progression-free survival has not been reached in the antibody-based therapy arm. It's at around 60 odd percent. Whereas the previous approach that we had, patients had a median progression-free survival of about 50 months. What that means is that this combination improves that remission period with 45% reduction in the risk of disease progression or death compared to the standard of care. And the key message that I want to drive here is that our team is really focused on the objective of curing this disease, and we feel that we'll get there by sustaining deep remissions in these patients. So if we go to the next slide, the concept is fairly simple. I think we will get to curability of this disease within the next decade if we click once more. Our team is really focused on achieving sustained MRD negativity in all patients. I do think that we have the tools necessary to be able to accomplish that, and that will result in reduction in disease relapse over time. And we feel that we are getting there. There are several projects that our team is doing right now where we would be able to accomplish this. If we go to the next slide, I do want to give a shout out. This cancer medicine is a team sport. It's a privilege to be leading this team at MSK and to be part of the MSK team, at large, and really appreciate the support that you all provide to us to be able to do this kind of work. Now, I'm going to pass things on to my colleague, Dr. Dickson.
Thank you very much, Dr. Usmani. So I'm going to talk about a completely different disease now called liposarcoma. So while we wait for the slides to come up, liposarcoma is one of the subtypes of soft tissue cancer called sarcoma. These are cancers of the connective tissue, muscle, bone, fat, cartilage, nerve, that sort of thing. Next slide, please. And in this specific clinical trial, we're studying a disease called dedifferentiated liposarcoma. So sarcomas in general are relatively rare, about 1% of all cancers diagnosed in a developed country like the US, but that still translates to about 15,000 cases a year. And of the many different sarcoma subtypes, liposarcoma is one of the more common to occur in adults with several thousand cases each year. Though it's new diagnoses, of course, many more living with the disease. These are often diagnosed as very large masses in the abdomen. People sometimes think they were just gaining weight and didn't realize a tumor was growing, and they're quite large at the time they're diagnosed. And the usual approach for this disease for many years has been complete surgical removal whenever possible. But unfortunately, recurrence is common, and the available treatment options for people living with recurrence has been limited. The standard drug for recurrent disease has been one called doxorubicin, also known as adriamycin, which has been the standard treatment for sarcoma since the 1970s, with little advance in over 50 years. But thanks to the efforts of the scientists at Sloan Kettering Institute and MSK, we've learned a lot about the biology of this disease and discovered almost 20 years ago that there's a specific gene called cyclin-dependent kinase 4, or CDK4, that is amplified or overexpressed in almost all cases of this disease. And that excess signaling of that CDK4 protein is what drives the cells to grow and the cancer to grow. Next slide, please. So we're fortunate now to have drugs available in the clinic, which are CDK4 inhibitors. Some of these may already be familiar to you from their use in breast cancer. They include drugs like palbociclib, ribociclib, and abemaciclib. So we've been very interested in studying CDK4 inhibitors in liposarcoma and actually started the first phase 2 study of palbociclib back in 2010 at MSK. And then we did a subsequent study of abemaciclib starting in 2016. These were phase 2 studies enrolling patients only at MSK and showed a promising signal that this measure of median progression-free survival, which is the average amount of time patients go without their tumors growing or getting worse, was about 4.2 months with the palbociclib and about 7.7 months with abemaciclib. For context, the FDA-approved chemotherapies generally give you a PFS of around 2 months. So already we were seeing an encouraging signal in these early phase MSK trials. But to prove it, we really need to do a larger national multi-center study to evaluate this in a larger group of patients. And that's what this study was, called SARC-41. Next slide, please. So it's a very simple design, really. Patients are enrolled with recurrent liposarcoma. They're randomized 1-to-1 to receive either abemaciclib, which is a daily pill, or a matching placebo. This is double-blinded, so the doctor doesn't know and the patient doesn't know. And then they're followed with regular scans. And if the tumor grows, the unblinding is done, so we figure out what they were getting. And if they were on placebo, they have the chance to cross over to receive abemaciclib. So everyone gets the chance to try the new drug, and that's really important in making this a fair study. Next slide, please. And this is the result. So over 100 patients treated. So for a rare disease like dedifferentiated liposarcoma, this is really a big result. And if you look at the median progression-free survival for placebo, it was only 1.5 months. But for abemaciclib, it was 9.7 months. Recall that in phase 2, it was only 7.7 months. So this outperformed our expectations. And this is analyzed with a hazard ratio of 0.38, which means that there's a 62% reduction in the risk of recurrence or death while on treatment with abemaciclib. Next slide, please. And the other striking thing about this study, which I have to say I didn't really expect, is that overall survival was actually better for people who got abemaciclib first. And that's even though 85% of people who were randomized to placebo subsequently received abemaciclib as well. So it suggests that getting this drug earlier led to better patient outcomes. And if you look, for example, at the 2-year time point, 72% of patients on abemaciclib are alive, only 51% on placebo. So this is the first study that really moved the needle in this disease. Next slide, please. And this is what we call a waterfall plot, which shows the best response for each patient. So each bar is an individual patient, and you can see that the bars going up, the tumors are growing, and if it's going down, they're shrinking. But clearly it didn't shrink for everyone, but when it did shrink, it could be really dramatic. And the patient on the very right, that lowest bar that's like minus 80%, she had a really dramatic story. She's in her 70s. She had recurrence of the cancer after surgery, a lot of tumor in the belly, a lot of symptoms, bloating, nausea, weight loss, fatigue. Chemotherapy had no effect. And we were discussing treatment options, but she was really in despair and considering enrolling on hospice and didn't want to do any more chemotherapy. And so I said, well, how about this? What do you think about this clinical trial? And she enrolled on the study. She had within weeks a dramatic improvement in her symptoms and in her scan. She remains on treatment now over 4 years later, just taking her tablets every day. So it's a real success story and a show that we can at least help some of the people some of the time and make a big difference. Next slide, please. So this is the first positive clinical trial ever in dedifferentiated liposarcoma, which shows improvement in progression-free survival and also a trend towards improved overall survival. And we believe this offers a new treatment option for this disease. Next slide. The drug is currently available in the United States based on the NCCN guidelines, even though it's not formally FDA approved for liposarcoma. Ongoing discussions with European regulators, Japan, et cetera, to see if we can provide this drug to more patients worldwide. But I do also want to call out our donors, our supporters, our philanthropic support. Cycle for Survival started almost 20 years ago with a sarcoma patient to really fund research in rare diseases and was critical to fund the early stage clinical trials, the phase 1, the phase 2, the phase 3, the Mitchell Goodman Fund, many other donors, some of whom I even see on the call today. So thank you. There's not a lot of big pharma interest in rare diseases like this. So to make it happen, we had to combine philanthropy, government support from the NCI, and industry sponsors who are providing the drug and additional funding to get it done. And it just showed that if you have a good idea and if you really persevere and build the right team, you can succeed. So a big thank you to everyone who helped support this over the last 15 years. So I'll stop there and turn it back to Dr. Levine.
Great. Thanks so much to each of you. Those were spectacular presentations. I would just, I guess, make 2 comments. The first is that, each of these, I think if you went back 10 or 15 years ago, for those of us that were earlier in our careers or were in training or had people in our lives that were affected by these diseases, all of these things were not, I think, viewed as possible. The idea that we would have incredibly effective medicines for pancreatic cancer that would work in many patients, the fact that we would have targeted therapy for sarcoma, and the fact that myeloma would go from a incredibly hard to treat disease to having an incredible wealth of therapeutic opportunities. These are tremendous advances, and thanks to you and your teams and the patients for doing that. And so I thought maybe I could ask a couple of questions. I'll start with Dr. O'Reilly. I guess to place things in context, you spoke today primarily about RAS targeting therapies. Love to get your perspective on what else you're excited about. Obviously, our group's been very much in the lead of thinking about how to leverage the immune system, including through vaccines. What's your perspective? What are you excited about that's on the horizon for pancreatic cancer? And what should our patients and their supporters look forward to?
Yes, thank you so much. I think this is a great question because it's absolutely at the forefront of what's happening in pancreas cancer, is how we can utilize immunotherapy and leverage it to benefit for patients, right? It's been, again, a tough bar and the typical immunotherapy approaches of immune checkpoint blockade treatments have not been successful in large part in pancreas cancer, but there are two main avenues that are very actively in development. Personalized neoantigen vaccines, so that's utilizing an individual person's tumor and developing a customized vaccine for that specific person, and that's come from in-house science from Vinod Balachandran and many of our colleagues here at MSK, and that has very swiftly moved to late-stage development in pancreas cancer in a randomized setting. So that study has actually just about enrolled, and we're looking to see the maturation of that and how that might inform practice. So stay tuned there. The other approach that's being evaluated is using an off-the-shelf type vaccine. So still personalized in the sense that it's matching some targets in a given person's tumor, but you don't have to do it on an individual person basis. So in some regards, that's a little bit easier. It's scalable, maybe a little bit less resource intensive, and perhaps a little more practical in some settings. And we're similarly awaiting a readout of a study in the post-op setting and, hoping to move that forward. But I'll make one last comment and then turn it back to Dr. Levine, that I think the other intersection here is, the small molecules that we showed in terms of RAS targeting and leveraging immunotherapy, to what Dr. Vickers mentioned, right? How we can convert this into a durable setting of cancer control. And that potential, I think, is lurking in pancreas cancer.
Great. Thanks so much. Dr. Usmani, maybe some perspective on the journey for the myeloma patients and their providers and where we are and where we're going. Again, you look and you say 15, 20 years ago, there were very few drugs, and now there's an incredible armamentarium, and you showed some of the most exciting results I've ever seen. People are starting to ask questions about whether we'll get to cures or durable sort of treatment-free remissions for this disease. So where do you see that, and what do you think we need to do to get there?
No, thank you so much, Dr. Levine. I think this is such an important question in the field now that we are getting such deep responses for myeloma patients. We actually held the first ever Cure Summit in myeloma earlier this year in February, where a select group of investigators from around the world got together and actually sat down with our colleagues in leukemia, with germ cell tumors, with lymphoma, and try to understand how they thought about the curability or cure definition, and try to apply those lessons to multiple myeloma. So we are moving towards a treatment-free interval or a fixed duration treatment model in multiple myeloma. And that would be the first step, and doing it at a time when we can get to undetectable levels by using these MRD tests is how we're going to get there. We have a host of T-cell redirecting therapies, novel technologies in CAR T-cell therapies, now with the in vivo CAR technology coming into play. I think, with all these tools, we will be able to achieve that goal for majority of our patients. But again, that work requires a lot of orchestration, and a lot of support from the folks who are listening to us today.
Great, thanks. Dr. Dickson, I wanted to return to something that I think you highlighted and get you maybe to sort of expand on it and look forward. The story that you tell is one, like you said, that pharmaceutical companies weren't interested in pursuing, and is really, I think, a collaborative effort between incredible SKI scientists and yourself and Dr. Tapp and many others. And so I guess the questions I have for you are twofold. One, I think you highlighted this a bit. What made this happen when maybe there were a lot of headwinds that might have otherwise not allowed it to happen at many other places? And what are you excited about, given that opportunity, given this community, that you think can be applied to other sarcomas?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, when you would think about the history of sarcoma therapy, maybe 30 or 40 years ago, all sarcomas would be lumped together and given one drug, and it rarely worked very well. And we've learned that we really need to subdivide and identify a specific target and target that sarcoma. That's led to successes and FDA approvals of multiple drugs, things like the first T cell therapy for synovial sarcoma or for any solid tumor developed by our colleagues at MSK, new drugs for desmoid, new drugs for TGCT, new drugs for epithelioid sarcoma, and on and on. So we've really had to become splitters so that we now have a big long list of all the different sarcomas. But fortunately, now we're developing a big long list of all the appropriate treatments for each of those subtypes. And I think treating there's not a one size fits all. There's not one drug that's going to work for all cancers. So we really need to individualize the treatment for the patient and for the disease. And we have this sort of discussion back and forth about how we fund research for rare diseases or common diseases. Well, what is rare? I mean, every patient is unique. Everyone's cancer is unique. So everyone really has a rare cancer. I was thinking about some of the other recent data we saw of, for example, the RET inhibitor in lung cancer with improved outcomes there. Lung cancer is common, but lung cancer with a RET mutation is actually very rare. So last year's data from Andreas Ursic and colleagues showing that patients with rectal cancer can be spared chemotherapy and radiation cured just with immunotherapy, but only if they have a very rare subtype of rectal cancer. So I think we're well into the era of personalized medicine and treating everyone individually and uniquely for their own rare disease.
Yeah, and back to Selwyn's point earlier, the idea that we can use things like the data and compute to really tailor that for these rare cancers and these individual patients feels like an incredible transformative opportunity because you guys know so much about this disease and we can leverage that not just to help patients who get to MSK, but patients everywhere.
The other thing, if I can add, is, sarcoma is rare enough. There's 15,000 cases a year, and there are about 15,000 oncologists in the United States. So if they were all evenly distributed, each doctor would see one a year. And that's not enough, right, to develop expertise in a research program and a translational research program. So the fact that we have a very high volume sarcoma center with integrated surgery, radiation oncology, and medical oncology has really allowed us to build this over the years and to have the patient volume in the clinical trial infrastructure to advance the field.
Right. Back to Dr. O'Reilly. I wanted to sort of to take out your crystal ball. And like, if you look at sort of the RAS field and this being a watershed moment, like what's next? Are we going to have many more different types of drugs that target RAS? Are we going to have combinations? What do you see? What's coming in the early phase trials? What are you excited about? And obviously understanding that many of those things may not work, but we need to try them. And we appreciate our patients being on this journey and to be in these trials.
Thank you so much. I think we're just extraordinarily excited in the field, right? There's a chink in the armor now, and there's opportunity. And with some degree of success, right, brings a lot of interest from multiple settings, from the drug development perspective, from patients supporting the science, from leveraging our colleagues' collaborations, learning from each individual person, and from having people outside of the same field looking at pancreas cancer, thinking about it differently, and seeing how we can push it forward. I think this is just the absolute start of what's going to be a sea change in terms of how we think and approach this disease. And I want to build on Dr. Dickson's point as well, because I think this is a very important one, right? That it's not just one thing. It's not just a drug or a person in terms of a physician. It's everything that from start to finish in terms of the diagnostics, in terms of managing any treatment or disease related complexity, in terms of the therapeutics, in terms of the local therapies. Every single part of this contributes to outcome. And I think as our audience is thinking about this, it's, just you're not just supporting one thing, it's supporting a huge momentum of change in the field that takes dozens and dozens and dozens of people across multiple disciplines.
Great. Dr. Usmani, I think likewise, it feels like myeloma is on an extraordinary journey. I guess my question for you is, beyond the question of how to sort of deepen these remissions, especially when you ask, our communities with us today, like, what are you excited about? What do you need to really change the narrative even further for our patients with myeloma?
Yeah, so for over 40 years in the field, the first line that we read in every myeloma article is multiple myeloma is an incurable cancer. And I think that whole shift, that paradigm shift that we're actually talking about curing this disease, talking about turning this disease into a fixed duration treatment model where, maybe 4 or 5 years from now, once we've delivered that treatment, I can shake my patient's hand and say, you don't need to see me again. That is what I aspire for, and that's what, I'm really looking forward to do in the next 10 years. And, I mean, that it's really exciting to be at this, phase of drug development for myeloma in particular, to be able to, hope for that, and it's a very, measured hope. It's not just as, pie in the sky kind of a situation. I think we're going to get there.
Great. Well, I mean, I think from my perspective, I am humbled and inspired to hear from each and every one of you, not just the progress, but the optimism and I think the sort of reflection you have on how much of a village it took actually to accomplish these things. And not just obviously the patients, the investigators, but this community who's on this call, the support that folks have given to allow things like the creation of the Pancreatic Cancer Center, which allowed us to be poised to be a leader so that when the therapeutic armamentarium changed, the cycle support of sarcoma efforts for 2 decades, as Mark said, has allowed us to be really ready to be the leader when these opportunities come and to really push on when many others wouldn't. And, as you said, Saad, I think, we're aspirational here. And I think our community expects us to be aspirational and asks us all the time, what do you need that allows you to do it? And I think to leave that with our community, it really is a journey. These great successes are just part of the story. As Eileen said, this one chink in the honor of a tough disease. We have a lot more to do. And we're on this journey with each and every one of you. So when you hear these advances, know that you are part of those advances. You are contributing to those advances, and we are grateful for your partnership as part of that journey. So with that, I will hand it back to our leader, Dr. Vickers, to really give us some closing comments and reflections. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ross. Thank you, Eileen, Saad, and Mark. Your participation was really powerful. You each have demonstrated not only credible advancements, but powerfully demonstrated hope that did not exist for our patients 2 to 3 years ago. And thank you. And these are some of the most difficult tumors that anyone would face in a cancer center. And obviously, they're equally, if not more difficult for any patient who comes with them. This demonstrates the progress that can occur when our communities engage and when our philanthropic world has the impact that we really want to see. Many have said we're in the golden age of cancer therapeutics, that discoveries that we hadn't anticipated or perceived possible are coming forward. I would argue the analogy I would use is that the engine to drive these new therapies is MSK. The horsepower to produce the outcome are our faculty and the fuel that we need to go forward in the support of our philanthropic community. I think you see a community and an organization that has the legacy and culture to actually lead the world in cancer breakthroughs. You see a culture that is willing to face the difficult realities sometimes, but on a regular, if not significant and daily basis, seeks the extraordinary. As Ross said, truly aspirational. And yet what we're able to do is because of you, because of your contribution. Coming up soon, July 16th, is Giving Day at MSK. It's our 4th annual day where we ask everybody to participate in helping us make a difference through these groundbreaking discoveries for patients with cancer. We clearly want to thank everybody who's tuned in today. Hopefully you were inspired to see what has been accomplished and also dream of what can be accomplished with the support that we work to pull together and make a difference for patients with cancer. I really want to thank you all for being on this journey and for allowing us to truly change the lives of our patients who we see on a daily basis, and they come to us expecting for us to make a difference. Thank you all again. Thank you again, Ross, Dr. Usmani, Dr. Dickson, and Dr. O'Reilly.